Hey kids, it's Pastor Amanda, and I am going to read our story today about Good Friday. Good Friday, you probably wonder, why do we call it good? Well, 2,000 years later, we understand the goodness of God because we also know the resurrection of Jesus. But this Friday, 2,000 years ago, was the day that Jesus died. It was a pretty sad day, especially for Jesus' friends and family. And so we're going to hear that story now. I'm reading to you from the Spark Story Bible. This Bible is published by Augsburg Fortress, and I thank them for letting us tell these stories. The first part of the story is called Christ the King. Here is Jesus, and he's talking to one of the main guys, Pontius Pilate. He was a man in charge. Let's hear the story. The priests were mad at Jesus, and they wanted to get rid of him. "What will happen to us if people follow Jesus?" they grumbled. So they made a plan. "Let's take Jesus to the governor, Pontius Pilate. He can get rid of Jesus." When Pontius Pilate saw Jesus, he said, "Are you king of the Jews?" Jesus did not answer. Pilate thought kings ruled over countries and people. Jesus knew that his power was about loving God. Jesus' kingdom was not the same. Pilate was frustrated. Some people wanted to kill Jesus, but Pilate didn't think Jesus had done anything wrong. Pilate didn't want any trouble, so he handed Jesus over to the people. The religious leaders smiled. Soon, Jesus would be gone. Jesus knew that he would die, but that wouldn't be the end of the story, because Jesus knew God's plan too. It was a very sad day when Jesus died. The soldiers who had arrested Jesus teased him for pretending to be a king. They took his clothes and put a king's purple cloak on him. They made a crown of vines and thorns, very sharp, and they put it on Jesus' head. Ouch. The soldiers made Jesus carry a heavy wooden cross. The cross was too heavy for him, and Jesus fell and skinned his knees, and the cross tumbled to the ground. A man in the crowd carried the cross the rest of the way. The soldiers nailed Jesus' hands and feet to the cross. They raised Jesus' cross up on a hill between two other men. The other men were thieves, and they were being crucified too. One of the men was angry with Jesus. "If you're a powerful king, why don't you save yourself? And why don't you save us too?" The man spit at Jesus. But the other thief believed in Jesus, and he shouted back, "Don't you know who this is? This is God's son, and he hasn't done anything wrong. We are being punished for our mistakes, but Jesus, he shouldn't even be here." The man turned to Jesus and asked, "Will you take me to heaven with you?" And Jesus looked at the man and felt compassion for him. And Jesus told him, "Yes, today we will be in heaven together." Here you can see the bottom of the three crosses and the people who were looking on. They're crying and they're very sad. There off in the distance is the three crosses. After a while, the world grew very dark, as if a terrible thunderstorm was coming. It was as if all of creation was crying because Jesus was about to die. Jesus was feeling all alone and prayed to God to see if he was still there. Of course, God never left Jesus. God was with him the whole time. Jesus looked at the crowd. He was so sad that people didn't believe that he was God's son. But he asked God to forgive the people for killing him. The soldiers offered him some sour wine, but he didn't want to drink it. He was ready to die. Finally, Jesus had fought for long enough. He said, "God, the work you gave me to do here is finished." And he breathed a final, long, slow breath and then he died. They buried Jesus in a tomb. His friends took care of his body and took care of him and put him in a tomb and rolled a great big stone in front of it. And the tomb stayed like that for 3 days. He invites you to find a Bible, to cover it with a black cloth. Take some time to be silent and remember the sacrifice of Jesus that we remember on this day. And if you feel a little scared or a little nervous or a little unsure, just remember, we who believe in Jesus, we know that this is not the end of the story. And in 3 days, I can't wait until we celebrate together. For tonight, we remember the cross and we remember Jesus.